The frozen breath of winter had never seemed so cruel, until Clara Zimmerman pressed her palms against the ice-covered window of the stagecoach and realized no help was coming. January 1882 had brought the worst blizzard Nevada had seen in 20 years, and she was trapped in what might become her tomb, watching snow pile against the wheels while the driver and guard lay motionless in the drifts outside, victims of the brutal cold that had swept down from the mountains without warning. She had left Sacramento 3 days ago with hope burning in her chest and a teaching position waiting in Virginia City, but now she wondered if she would ever see another sunrise. The cold had seeped through every crack in the stagecoach, turning her breath to fog and her fingers to ice despite her gloves. Clara pulled her wool coat tighter around her body, but it did nothing against the merciless wind that howled across the high desert basin. She had stopped feeling her toes an hour ago, and now a dangerous drowsiness was creeping over her, the kind she knew meant her body was giving up the fight. Her eyelids grew heavy despite her efforts to keep them open. Through the frosted glass, she could barely make out the shapes of sagebrush buried under snow. The landscape transformed into an endless white nightmare. She thought of her mother back in Sacramento, probably sitting by the fire with her knitting, unaware that her eldest daughter was freezing to death in the middle of nowhere. Clara was 22 years old, educated at Miss Porter's School for Young Ladies, fluent in 3 languages, and none of it mattered now. The wilderness did not care about accomplishments or dreams or the letters of recommendation folded carefully in her carpetbag. Nature was indifferent to human ambition. Just as her eyes began to close for what she feared might be the last time, she heard something that cut through the wind's endless shriek. Hoofbeats, heavy and determined, growing closer. Clara forced her frozen hands to move, scraping at the window with her nails to clear a small circle in the ice. Through the gap, she saw him, a figure on horseback emerging from the white curtain of snow like an apparition. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a bandana covering the lower half of his face against the cold. For a moment, she thought she might be hallucinating, that her dying mind was conjuring salvation that did not exist. But then he was there, swinging down from his horse with practiced ease despite the treacherous footing. His boots crunched through snow that came up past his knees as he fought his way to the stagecoach door. Clara tried to call out, but her voice came as barely a whisper, her throat too frozen to cooperate. She watched him yank at the door, which had frozen shut, saw the determination in every movement as he drew a knife and began working at the ice that sealed it closed. When the door finally gave way with a crack like breaking glass, a rush of even colder air swept in, and Clara gasped. The man pulled the bandana down from his face, revealing strong features weathered by sun and wind, a jaw darkened with several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds that widened when they found her huddled in the corner. "Lord Almighty," he breathed, his voice rough and deep. "You are alive." He climbed into the stagecoach, bringing with him the smell of leather and horse and something warm, something alive that seemed impossible in this frozen hell. His gloved hands reached for her, and Clara tried to pull away instinctively, but her body would not obey. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentling. "I am here to help. Can you move your legs?" Clara shook her head, managing only that small gesture. The man muttered something under his breath, then without hesitation, he unbuttoned his sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her over her own inadequate wool one. The residual warmth from his body hit her like a shock, and she gasped again. "We need to get you somewhere warm," he said, his gray eyes searching her face with an intensity that might have unnerved her under other circumstances. "My ranch is not far. Can you hold on to me?" Before she could answer, he was lifting her, one arm under her knees and the other supporting her back, carrying her out of the stagecoach as though she weighed nothing. The wind hit them immediately, and Clara buried her face against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him through his wool shirt. He smelled like smoke and pine, and she clung to that small comfort as he carried her through the storm. Getting her onto his horse proved challenging with her unable to help, but he managed it with a strength that spoke of years of hard labor. He climbed up behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping one arm securely around her waist while the other hand took up the reins. "Stay with me," he said close to her ear, his breath warm against her frozen skin. "Do not fall asleep. Talk to me. Tell me your name." "Clara," she managed through chattering teeth. "Clara Zimmerman." "Clara," he repeated, and somehow hearing her name in his rough voice made her feel more real, more alive. "I am Kane Voss. My ranch is about 2 miles east. We will get you warm, I promise." The ride was a blur of white and cold in the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. Kane kept talking to her, asking her questions that required answers, refusing to let her slip into the dangerous sleep that beckoned. "Where were you headed?" "Virginia City. Teaching position." "You are a teacher?" "Yes." "That is good. We need more teachers out here." "Where are you from?" "Sacramento. Long way from home. You have family there." "My mother. 2 sisters." His arm tightened around her waist and Clara realized she had started to slump. "Stay awake, Clara, just a little longer. See those cottonwoods ahead? My place is just past them." She forced her eyes to focus on the dark shapes of trees emerging from the snow. They seemed impossibly far away, but Kane kept his horse moving steadily forward, his body a wall of warmth at her back. Clara had never been this close to a man before, certainly never held in such an intimate embrace, but propriety seemed laughably unimportant when death was still clawing at her heels. When they finally reached the ranch, Clara had only vague impressions. A sturdy log house with smoke rising from the chimney, a barn that loomed dark and solid against the white landscape, corrals with horses huddled together for warmth. Kane dismounted and lifted her down, then carried her up the steps and kicked the door open. The warmth inside hit her like a physical blow. A fire roared in a large stone fireplace, filling the main room with blessed heat. Kane carried her straight to it, settling her in a chair close to the flames before striding away. Clara heard water being poured, the clang of metal, the sound of him moving with purpose through the house. He returned with blankets and began wrapping them around her, his movements efficient but somehow gentle. "We need to warm you slowly," he explained. "Too fast and it will do more harm than good. Can you feel your fingers or toes yet?" Clara tried to wiggle her toes and gasped at the painful tingling that resulted. "Hurts. Good. Pain means they are waking up. That is what we want." He pulled a stool over and sat in front of her, taking her hands in his and beginning to rub them carefully through the blankets. "The driver and guard. I saw them. Were they?" "Yes," Clara whispered, her eyes filling with tears that froze on her lashes. "They died trying to get the horses unhitched. The storm came so fast. One moment we were traveling under clear skies and the next we could not see 10 feet ahead. The horses panicked and when the driver climbed down he just collapsed. The guard went to help him and did not get back up." Kane's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "You did right by staying in the coach. Going out there would have killed you too. How did you find me?" "I was out checking on some cattle in the north pasture when the storm hit. Was heading back when I saw the coach. Almost rode past. Figured everyone would have had sense to seek shelter, but something made me check." His gray eyes met hers, and Clara saw something flicker in their depths. I am glad I listened to that instinct. You saved my life, Clara said, the weight of those words settling over her. This stranger had ridden through a killer storm and pulled her back from the edge of death. I do not know how to thank you. No thanks needed. Out here, we look after each other. It is the only way to survive. He released her hands and stood. I am going to make you some broth. You need to get something warm inside you. Clara watched him move to the kitchen area, this rough man who handled his domestic tasks with the same competent ease he had shown in rescuing her. The house was simple but well kept, with solid furniture and a neatness that surprised her. Most bachelor establishments she had heard described were slovenly affairs, but Kane Voss clearly took pride in his home. As the warmth gradually returned to her body, Clara became aware of just how close she had come to dying. Her hands shook as reaction set in, and tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away, embarrassed to cry in front of this man, but they kept coming. Kane returned with a mug of steaming broth and crouched beside her chair. When he saw her tears, something in his expression softened. "Let it out," he said quietly. "You have earned those tears." "I was so frightened," Clara whispered. "I thought I would never see my family again. I thought I would die alone in that coach and no one would find me until spring. But you did not die. You fought to stay alive until help came, and that took courage." He held the mug to her lips. "Small sips. Let it warm you from the inside." The broth was rich and savory, and as it slid down her throat, Clara felt the first real hope that she might actually survive this ordeal. She drank slowly as Kane held the mug steady, his large hands careful not to let her take too much too fast. When she had finished half the broth, he set the mug aside and checked her hands and feet again, nodding with satisfaction at the color returning to her skin. "You will be fine," he said. "Cold got to you, but not deep enough to do lasting damage. You are lucky." "Because of you," Clara insisted. "If you had not come." "But I did." He stood and added another log to the fire. "The storm shows no sign of letting up. You will need to stay here until it passes. I have a spare room upstairs. Nothing fancy, but the bed is clean and there are plenty of blankets." The impropriety of the situation suddenly struck Clara. She was completely alone with a strange man in his house, miles from anyone who might vouch for her reputation. If word got out, her teaching position in Virginia City would vanish before she ever reached it. But what choice did she have? To insist on leaving would be suicide. Kane must have seen something in her expression because he said, "I know this is not proper by city standards, but out here, survival comes before society rules. I give you my word that you will be safe under my roof." "I would never take advantage of a woman in distress." Clara looked at him, at the honest steadiness in his gray eyes, and made a decision to trust him. "I believe you, and I am grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Voss." "Kane," he corrected. "Seeing as we are going to be sharing a roof for a few days, we might as well dispense with formality." "Clara," she offered in return, though he already knew her name. "Rest now, Clara. I need to tend the animals, make sure they are secure for the night. Will you be all right alone for a bit?" She nodded, and he pulled on his coat and hat before heading back out into the storm. As soon as he was gone, Clara became acutely aware of the silence in the house, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the howl of wind outside. She should have been terrified, stranded with a stranger in the middle of a blizzard, but instead she felt oddly safe. Kane returned 20 minutes later, covered in snow and shaking from the cold. Clara watched as he hung up his coat and hat, then moved to the fire to warm himself. His hair was dark and wet, falling across his forehead, and for the first time, she really looked at him. He was probably close to 30, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years outdoors. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a working man, and there was a strength in the way he carried himself that spoke of confidence earned through experience. "How long have you lived here?" Clara asked, wanting to fill the silence. "Built this place 5 years ago. Came out from Kansas after my father died and left me enough money to buy land and cattle. Been building the herd ever since." He glanced at her. "It is a hard life, but it is mine. I answer to no one but myself and God. Do you not get lonely?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it, and she immediately felt her cheeks heat. But Kane did not seem offended. He stared into the fire, considering his answer. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I go into Tanapa Junction when I need supplies or company, but mostly I keep to myself. After my wife died, I found I preferred solitude." Clara's heart squeezed at the pain that flickered across his face. "I am sorry for your loss. It was 3 years ago. Fever took her. We had only been married a year." He was quiet for a moment. "Lucy was a good woman. She deserved better than dying out here in the middle of nowhere. I am sure she was happy with you." Kane's smile was sad. "I tried to make her happy, tried to give her the life she wanted, but the land is harsh and she was not built for it. She was from back east like you. Came out with her family on the wagon trains and ended up here when her father got work at the silver mines. We met at a church social, and I thought—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Does not matter what I thought. She is gone now." Clara wanted to reach out to him to offer some comfort, but she did not know how. Instead, she said softly, "It matters that you loved her. That always matters." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara felt something shift in the air between them. It was not anything she could name, just a subtle awareness that had not been there before. Kane cleared his throat and stood abruptly. "You should eat more. I will fix us some supper." Over the next hour, Clara watched as Kane prepared a simple but hearty meal of salt pork, beans, and cornbread. He moved around the kitchen with comfortable familiarity, and Clara found herself wondering about the life he had built here. What dreams had brought him west? What kept him here after losing his wife? Did he ever regret his choice to live so far from civilization? They ate at a rough-hewn table near the fire, and gradually, the conversation began to flow more easily. Kane asked about her teaching plans, and Clara found herself telling him about her education, her love of books, her hope to make a difference in the lives of frontier children who had few opportunities for learning. "Virginia City will be lucky to have you," Kane said, and there was warmth in his voice that made Clara's pulse quicken. "If I ever get there," she replied. "The Stagecoach company will need to be notified about what happened, and I suppose someone will need to take care of the driver and guard. I will ride into Tanapa Junction once the storm breaks. Let the sheriff know. They will send men to retrieve the bodies and the coach. As for getting you to Virginia City, that can be arranged once the weather clears." The thought of leaving filled Clara with an unexpected reluctance, which was absurd. She had been here barely a few hours, but there was something about Kane Voss that drew her, a quiet strength and decency that she found deeply appealing. That night, Kane showed her to the spare room upstairs. It was small and simple, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the snow-covered landscape. He had built up the fire in the small stove in the corner, and the room was blissfully warm. "Holler if you need anything," Kane said from the doorway. "I will be right downstairs." "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything." He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Clara?" "Yes, I am glad you are alive." Before she could respond, he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs. Clara stood in the middle of the small room, her heart beating faster than it should. She had been rescued by many men in the novels she loved to read, but none of them had ever seemed as real as Kane Voss, with his sad eyes and gentle hands and the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. The storm raged for 3 more days, holding them captive in the house while snow piled higher against the walls. Clara found herself settling into an unexpected rhythm with Kane, their initial awkwardness giving way to an easy companionship that surprised them both. On the second morning, she woke to find Kane already up and working on ranch accounts at the kitchen table. Clara made herself useful by preparing breakfast, and though the kitchen was unfamiliar, she managed to produce a respectable meal of eggs and biscuits. "Where did you learn to cook?" Kane asked, genuine curiosity in his voice as he helped himself to seconds. "My mother. She insisted all her daughters know how to run a household, regardless of our education. She said a woman should be capable of taking care of herself." "Smart woman." As they cleaned up together, their hands brushed over the wash basin, and Clara felt a jolt of awareness run through her. She glanced at Kane and caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. He pulled away quickly, clearing his throat. "I should check on the stock." He disappeared into the cold, leaving Clara alone with her racing thoughts. This was madness. She barely knew this man. He was a widower still mourning his wife, and she was a respectable woman with a teaching position waiting. There could be nothing between them. But her heart did not seem to care about logic. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Kane asked about her life in Sacramento. Clara found herself telling him things she had never shared with anyone, about her father's death when she was 12, about the struggle to keep the family afloat on her mother's meager earnings as a seamstress, about her determination to get an education and make something of herself. "You are brave," Kane said quietly, "coming out here alone, ready to start a new life in a place you have never seen." "Or foolish," Clara replied with a sad smile. "I nearly died before I even arrived. You are alive because you did not give up. That takes strength." Their eyes met across the firelight, and Clara felt her breath catch. There was admiration in Kane's gaze and something warmer, something that made her skin feel too tight. She looked away first, her heart pounding. On the third day, Clara discovered Kane's small collection of books on a shelf in the corner. Most were practical guides to ranching and animal husbandry, but tucked among them were a few worn volumes of poetry and a copy of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. "You like Dickens?" she asked, holding up the book. Kane looked almost embarrassed. "Lucy used to read to me in the evenings. After she died, I kept her books. Sometimes I read them and hear her voice." The sadness in his words made Clara's chest ache. She sat down across from him. "Would you like me to read to you?" "It is the least I can do to repay your kindness." Something shifted in Kane's expression, a softening that transformed his weathered features. "I would like that." So Clara read aloud while the storm howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. Kane sat in his chair, his eyes closed, and Clara watched him as she read, memorizing the lines of his face, the way his shoulders relaxed as he listened, the small smile that played at the corners of his mouth during amusing passages. When she finally closed the book, the room had grown dark except for the firelight. Kane opened his eyes and looked at her with such warmth that Clara felt it like a physical touch. "Thank you," he said softly. Thank you. We can read more tomorrow if you would like." "I would like that very much." That night, as Clara lay in bed listening to the wind, she admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for 3 days. She was falling in love with Kane Voss. It was impractical and improbable and completely impossible, but there it was, true and undeniable as the cold wind outside, and she had no idea what to do about it. The fourth day dawned clear and bright, the storm finally exhausted. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of Kane chopping wood outside. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find the house already warm, the coffee already made. When Kane came in with an armload of firewood, his cheeks were red from the cold and his eyes were bright. "Roads should be passable by tomorrow," he said. "I will ride into Tanapa Junction and let them know about the stagecoach. They can arrange transport for you to Virginia City." Clara felt her stomach drop. Of course. This had always been temporary. She had a life waiting for her, a job, a purpose. Kane had his ranch and his solitude and the memory of his wife. What had she expected? "That is good news," she managed to say, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Kane set down the wood and turned to her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Clara, But whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. They both went to the window and saw 3 riders making their way up the snow-packed road toward the house. "That will be my neighbors," Kane said. "The Whitmore brothers from the next ranch over. They are probably checking to make sure I made it through the storm all right." The Whitmore brothers turned out to be a rowdy trio of cowboys who burst into the house with boisterous energy, trailing snow and cold air. They pulled up short when they saw Clara, their eyes widening. "Well, Kane, you have been holding out on us," the eldest brother, a man named Jack, said with a wide grin. "Who is this lovely lady?" Kane quickly explained about the stagecoach and the storm, and the brothers' expression sobered. But Clara noticed the speculative looks they kept shooting between her and Kane, and she felt her cheeks grow warm. The brothers stayed for coffee and conversation, filling the house with noise and laughter that felt strange after days of quiet. Clara liked them despite their rough manners. They clearly cared about Kane, teasing him with the familiarity of old friends. As they were leaving, Jack pulled Kane aside, but Clara heard him say, "She is a good one, Kane. Do not let her slip away." Kane's response was too quiet for Clara to hear, but she saw him shake his head, his expression troubled. After the brothers left, the house felt too quiet. Kane disappeared into the barn, and Clara busied herself with cleaning, anything to keep her hands occupied, and her mind from dwelling on the fact that this was her last day here. That evening, Kane was subdued through dinner, answering her attempts at conversation with monosyllables. Finally, Clara set down her fork and said, "Have I done something to offend you?" Kane looked startled. "What? No, of course not. Then why will you barely look at me?" He was silent for a long moment, then pushed back from the table and walked to the fire. Clara followed, her patience wearing thin. "Kane, please, talk to me." He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her take a step back. "I do not want you to go," he said, the words seeming to tear out of him. "And I know I have no right to say that. You have a life planned, a good job waiting. I am just a rancher who happened to find you in a storm. But these past few days, having you here, talking with you, listening to you raid, I have felt alive again for the first time in 3 years. And tomorrow you will leave and I will be alone again, and I do not know if I can bear it." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Kane, I know it is too soon. I know you barely know me. But I need you to know, before you go, that you have brought light back into my life. You have reminded me what it feels like to hope for something beyond just getting through another day, and I—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I am making a mess of this." "No," Clara said, moving closer to him. "You are not." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. Kane froze, his eyes locked on hers. "I do not want to go either," Clara whispered. "I have been trying to convince myself that these feelings are just gratitude, just the result of you saving my life. But it is more than that. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for." Clara. Her name was a prayer on his lips. What are we going to do? I do not know. But I know I do not want to leave tomorrow without at least trying to figure it out. Kane's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Clara rested her head against his chest, hearing the strong, steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the firelight, neither willing to let go. Finally, Kane said, "Stay. Not just for tonight. Stay here." "With me?" Clara pulled back to look at him. "Stay, but my teaching position. I know I have no right to ask this of you. I know you have plans, ambitions. But Virginia City is not going anywhere. The school will find another teacher. Please, Clara, give us a chance. Give me a chance to court you properly, to show you what life here could be like. Kane, we barely know each other. Then let us get to know each other. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am asking you to stay long enough to see if what we feel now might grow into something lasting. And if it does not, if you decide you want that teaching job after all, I will take you to Virginia City myself and wish you well. But if we do not try, we will spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been." Clara looked up at this man who had saved her life and somehow captured her heart in the space of 4 days. It was madness. It was impractical. It was everything her rational mind told her to refuse, but her heart had other ideas. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." The relief that flooded Kane's face was beautiful to see. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks with infinite gentleness. "I promise you will not regret this," he said. "I will do everything in my power to make you happy." "You already do," Clara replied. Kane's eyes darkened, and for a moment Clara thought he might kiss her. But instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead in a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with tears. "We will do this right," he murmured against her skin. "No matter what the neighbors might think about you staying here unchaperoned, I will not compromise your reputation more than I already have. I do not care what people think, but I do. You matter to me, Clara. Your good name matters. Tomorrow I will ride into Tanapa Junction and spread word that you are staying on as my housekeeper while you recover from your ordeal. It is not much of a cover, but it is better than nothing. And I will court you proper, the way you deserve." Clara wanted to argue that she did not need protecting, that the opinions of strangers meant nothing compared to what she felt when she was with him. But she could see the determination in Kane's eyes and knew it came from a place of respect. So she simply nodded and let herself be held, storing up the feeling of his arms around her for the cold nights ahead, when propriety would demand they keep their distance. True to his word, Kane rode into Tanapa Junction the next morning. He returned that afternoon with supplies and news. The Stagecoach company had been notified. The bodies of the driver and guard had been recovered, and Clara's belongings had been retrieved from the coach and were being held at the sheriff's office. "I told everyone you were staying on to help around the place while you recovered," Kane said as he unloaded packages from his saddlebags. Sheriff Davis raised an eyebrow, but he did not say anything. "I imagine there will be talk, but that cannot be helped." "Let them talk," Clara said. "I know my own mind." Over the following weeks, Clara settled into life at the ranch with surprising ease. She took over the cooking and cleaning, tasks that freed Kane to focus on the demanding work of caring for his cattle and horses. But she also insisted on learning about the ranch itself, accompanying Kane on his rounds when the weather permitted, learning to read the signs of healthy and sick animals, understanding the rhythms of the land. Kane proved to be a patient teacher, explaining everything with a thoroughness that revealed how deeply he loved this life he had built. And Clara found herself falling in love not just with the man but with the land itself, with the stark beauty of the Nevada high desert, with the way the mountains turned purple at sunset, and the stars blazed overhead with an intensity she had never seen in Sacramento. Their courtship was unlike anything Clara had imagined when she dreamed of romance as a girl. There were no fancy restaurants or theater performances, no carriage rides through manicured parks. Instead, there were quiet evenings by the fire, reading to each other or talking about everything and nothing. There were rides across the winter landscape, bundled in warm coats and sharing a thermos of hot coffee. There were cooking lessons where Kane taught her how to make the biscuits Lucy had perfected, and Clara tried not to feel jealous of the ghost of the woman who had been there before her. One evening, about 3 weeks after she had decided to stay, Clara finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. They were sitting by the fire, her reading while Kane worked on mending a bridle, when she set down her book and said, "Tell me about Lucy." Kane's hands stilled. He was quiet for so long that Clara began to regret asking, but then he set aside the bridle and leaned back in his chair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Anything. You loved her, and I feel like I am living in her shadow. I need to understand who she was." Kane stared into the fire. Lucy was gentle and sweet and completely unsuited for this life. She tried. God knows she tried, but every day out here was a struggle for her. She missed her family, missed the social events in town, missed having neighbors close by. I think she was lonely even when I was right there beside her. "Why did she marry you?" "I think she saw me as a way out of the mining camp where her family lived. Her father drank. Her mother was worn down by too many children and too little money. I offered stability and a home of her own. I do not think she loved me, not really. But I loved her, and I thought that would be enough." He looked at Clara, his eyes haunted. "It was not enough. I could not make her happy, no matter how hard I tried. And when the fever came, I think part of her was relieved to let go." Clara crossed to him and knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "That was not your fault. Was it not? I brought her out here. I kept her here even when I could see she was fading. She made her own choices. And Kane, you cannot save people who do not want to be saved." "Believe me, I know." Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. "Who did you try to save?" Clara had not intended to share this, but fair was fair. "My father. He drank himself to death, and I spent years trying to fix him, trying to make him want to get better. I was only 12 when he died, but even then, I felt like I had failed him. It took me a long time to understand that his demons were his own, not mine." Kane pulled her up into his lap, and Clara went willingly, curling against him. "We are quite a pair," he murmured into her hair. "Both carrying ghosts. Maybe that is why we found each other. Maybe we needed someone who understood." They sat like that until the fire burned low, taking comfort in each other's warmth, beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserved a second chance at happiness. As winter gave way to early spring, their relationship deepened. Kane was courting her with a deliberate patience that Clara found both frustrating and endearing. He had not kissed her beyond chaste pecks on the cheek or forehead, always maintaining a careful distance even as the air between them crackled with unspoken want. Finally, one evening in mid-March, Clara's patience ran out. They were in the barn together, tending to a mare who had just foaled. The birth had gone smoothly, and they stood side by side watching the wobbly-legged foal nurse, both grinning with the simple joy of new life. "She is beautiful," Clara said. "Just like her mother," Kane agreed. Then softer, "Just like you." Clara turned to him, her heart in her throat. "Kane." He looked at her, and she saw her own longing reflected in his eyes. "Clara, She did not let him finish. Instead, she grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him down to her, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that contained weeks of pent-up desire. For a moment, Kane went rigid with surprise. Then his arms came around her and he was kissing her back with a hunger that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "I was trying to be a gentleman." "I do not want a gentleman right now. I want you, Clara." Her name was half groan, half prayer. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" "I hope the same thing you do to me," she whispered back. Kane kissed her again, slower this time but no less intense. His hands tangled in her hair and Clara pressed closer, wanting to eliminate every inch of space between them. When he pulled back this time, his eyes were blazing. "Marry me," he said. Clara blinked, sure she had misheard. "What? Marry me? I know it has only been 2 months. I know we should wait longer, do this proper. But I love you, Clara. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you laugh when the horses do something silly. I love how you are not afraid of hard work, how you have embraced this life even though it is nothing like what you planned. I love waking up knowing you are here, and I cannot imagine going back to the loneliness I felt before you arrived. So marry me, please." Tears were streaming down Clara's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Kane swept her up in his arms, spinning her around in the barn while the horses looked on with placid disinterest. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and this time there was a promise in it, a commitment that went deeper than words. They were married 3 weeks later in Tonopah Junction's small church, with the Whitmore brothers and a collection of ranchers and townspeople in attendance. Clara wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Kane had ordered from a catalog, and she carried wildflowers that she and Kane had picked together from the greening hillsides. The ceremony was brief, the Reverend's words familiar and comforting. But when Kane slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had been his grandmother's, Clara felt the full weight of what they were promising each other. This was forever. This was building a life together in this harsh, beautiful land, facing whatever came with joined hands and united hearts. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Kane kissed her with such tenderness that Clara heard more than one woman in the congregation sigh. The celebration afterward was held at the town's only restaurant, a boisterous affair with too much food and too much whiskey and endless toasts to the couple's health and happiness. Clara found herself passed from partner to partner in dances that left her dizzy and laughing, but her eyes always found Kane across the room, and the look he gave her promised things that made her blush. Finally, as the sun was setting and painting the desert sky in shades of orange and red, they rode back to the ranch together. Clara sat in front of Kane on his horse, leaning back against his chest, perfectly content. "Happy?" Kane asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara replied honestly. When they reached the house, Kane dismounted and then lifted her down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he swept her up in his arms and carried her up the steps. "What are you doing?" Clara laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold. It is tradition." He kicked open the door and carried her inside, and Clara saw that while they had been at the celebration, someone, probably the Whitmore brothers, had been here. Candles were lit throughout the main room, and rose petals were scattered across the floor leading up the stairs. "Those interfering fools," Kane said, but there was affection in his voice. He carried her up the stairs, and Clara's heart began to race. They had maintained separate rooms throughout their courtship, propriety demanding that distance. But tonight, that would change. Tonight, she would truly become his wife in every sense of the word. Kane set her down in what had been his room, now transformed with flowers and more candles. He turned to face her, and Clara saw nervousness in his eyes that matched her own. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that we do not have to do anything you are not ready for. I can wait as long as you need." Clara reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I do not want to wait." "I love you, Kane. I want to be your wife in every way." The heat that flared in his eyes made her shiver with anticipation. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, his hands learning the shape of her through the silk of her dress. Clara's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, frustrated by their stubbornness, until Kane took pity on her and helped. Their wedding night was a revelation of tenderness and passion, of whispered words and gasped breaths, of learning each other's bodies and hearts in the flickering candlelight. Kane was patient and gentle, guiding her through her nervousness until all that remained was pleasure and connection, and a sense of rightness that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Clara's head pillowed on Kane's chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her back. "I won't let you go cold again," Kane murmured, the words emerging from some deep place in his heart. "Not ever. I will keep you warm and safe for the rest of my days." Clara remembered the frozen stagecoach, the certainty that she was going to die alone in the cold, and she thought about how far she had traveled from that moment of despair to this moment of perfect contentment. "You already have," she whispered back. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Kane corrected, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I was frozen too, Clara, frozen in grief and loneliness. You thawed me out, made me want to live again instead of just exist. You gave me a reason to hope." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Clara's last thought before darkness claimed her was that she had never been so completely, perfectly happy. The first year of their marriage was not easy, but it was good. Clara learned the 1,000 small tasks required to keep a ranch running, from preserving food for the winter to helping with difficult births among the livestock. Her hands, once soft and suited for nothing more strenuous than holding a pen, became calloused and strong, but she did not mind. Every blister and ache was proof that she was building something real, something lasting. Kane taught her to ride properly, and she spent hours exploring the land that was now her home. She discovered hidden valleys where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color, springs that bubbled up from the earth crystal clear, and cold rock formations that looked like ancient cathedrals. The land was harsh, but it had a beauty that called to something in her soul. They faced challenges together. A harsh spring storm killed a dozen cattle, a loss they could ill afford. Clara held Kane as he raged against the unfairness of it, then helped him drag the carcasses away from the main herd. When a neighboring rancher tried to claim Kane's water rights, Clara was the one who dug through the land office records and found the documentation proving Kane's claim. But there were joys, too. The Whitmore brothers became regular visitors, and Clara learned to cook for a crowd as they often showed up right around dinner time. She made friends with the other ranch wives, women who had also chosen this hard life and who welcomed her into their circle with open arms. And every night, she fell asleep in Kane's arms, listening to his steady heartbeat and thanking God for the storm that had brought them together. In the fall, Clara realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when the town's doctor confirmed it during a visit to Tonopah Junction, the reality hit her with overwhelming force. She was going to have a baby. Kane's baby. When she told him that night, Kane's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, and she felt his shoulders shake with emotion. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, suddenly nervous. Kane pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were wet with tears. "Happy? Clara, I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I can possibly express. A baby, our baby." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach with a reverence that made Clara's eyes sting. "Hello in there," he said softly. "Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was difficult. Clara suffered from terrible nausea that lasted well into her 4th month, and the Nevada heat that summer seemed particularly oppressive. But Kane was attentive to the point of being overprotective, refusing to let her do any heavy work and fretting over her constantly. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Clara finally snapped one day when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but, Lucy." He stopped, his face going pale. Clara's irritation evaporated. She took his hands in hers. "I am not Lucy. I am strong, and this baby is strong. We are going to be fine. You cannot know that." "No, but I can believe it, and so can you. Do not let fear of what happened before steal the joy from what is happening now." Kane pulled her close, and Clara felt him shaking. "I cannot lose you," he whispered. "If something happened to you, it would destroy me." "Nothing is going to happen to me, I promise." It was a promise she had no right to make, but she made it anyway because Kane needed to hear it, and she was determined to keep it. As her belly grew, Clara found herself falling even more in love with her husband. He talked to the baby every night, his hands gentle on her stomach as he told stories about the ranch, and made promises about teaching the child to ride and showing them the hidden places where the best fishing holes could be found. "What if it is a girl?" Clara asked one night, amused by his assumption that they were having a son. "Then I will teach her to ride and fish just the same," Kane replied without hesitation. "And God help any fool boy who comes courting her when she is older. I will make sure she knows her own worth and does not settle for anything less than she deserves." "Like her father," Clara said softly. "Like her mother," Kane corrected. "You are the strongest person I know, Clara. This child will be lucky to have you. We are both lucky to have you." The baby came in early March, on a day when the wind howled and snow fell unseasonably late. Clara's labor started in the morning and lasted well into the night, hours of pain that left her exhausted and frightened. Kane stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement when she was sure she could not go on. The ranch wives had gathered to help, practical women who had all been through this before. They bustled around efficiently, heating water and preparing supplies, their presence comforting in its competence. Finally, as midnight approached, the baby was born. A boy, healthy and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. The midwife cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Clara's arms. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have been waiting so long to meet you." Kane was on his knees beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression of such wonder that it made Clara's heart ache. "He is perfect," Kane breathed. "Clara, he is absolutely perfect. Do you want to hold him?" Kane's hands were shaking as he took the baby, holding him with exaggerated care as though he might break. The baby quieted at his father's touch, and Kane let out a choked laugh. "He knows me." "Of course he does. He has been listening to your voice for months." They decided to name him Matthew, after Kane's father. And as Clara watched her husband hold their son, she thought about the frozen stagecoach and the desperate certainty that she was going to die. If someone had told her then that within 2 years she would be here, married to a man she loved beyond reason, holding their newborn child, she would never have believed it. But here she was, and she had never been more grateful for a blizzard. The years flowed by like water. Matthew grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's determination and his mother's curiosity. When he was 2, Clara became pregnant again, and this time she carried a girl they named Rose, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's smile. The ranch prospered. Kane's careful management and Clara's business sense proved a winning combination. They expanded the herd, bought more land, and built their reputation for raising quality cattle. The house grew too, additions added as the family expanded, turning the simple cabin into a proper home. More children came. Another boy, Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved books as much as his mother. Then twin girls, Elizabeth and Eleanor, who were terror and delight in equal measure. The house was always full of noise and laughter, and the chaos that came with raising 5 children on a working ranch. Clara sometimes thought about the teaching position she had never taken, the life she had planned that had been derailed by a blizzard. But she could not regret the path she had taken instead. She taught her own children with a devotion that would have made any school proud, and she opened her home to the children of neighboring ranchers, running an informal school during the winter months when ranch work slowed down. Kane remained the man she had fallen in love with that desperate winter, though time had added silver to his dark hair and deepened the lines around his eyes. He was an attentive father, patient with his children's endless questions, and never too busy to stop his work to examine a particularly interesting bug or explain how the windmill worked. Clara often caught him watching her with an expression that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world, even with flour in her hair and children clinging to her skirts. They had their hard times too. A drought one year that nearly broke them financially. An accident that left Kane with a badly broken leg that took months to heal. The death of Clara's mother, which meant a difficult trip back to Sacramento for the funeral, and the knowledge that her ties to her old life had been severed. But they faced everything together, their partnership forged in that first desperate winter strengthening with each challenge overcome. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kane surprised Clara with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with the Whitmores, who now had families of their own, and took the train to the city for a week of luxury that felt strange and wonderful after so many years of ranch life. They stayed in a fine hotel with running water and electric lights, ate in restaurants where Clara did not have to cook, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like young sweethearts. But as lovely as it was, they were both relieved to return home to the ranch, to the land they had built a life on. "I would not trade this for anything," Clara said one night as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were in bed, the ranch was quiet, and they had these moments to themselves. "Not even that teaching job in Virginia City," Kane teased. "Especially not that. That girl who climbed aboard the Stagecoach in Sacramento had no idea what she was really looking for, but she found it anyway." Kane took her hand, the simple gold band on her finger worn smooth by 2 decades of wear. "I thank God for that blizzard every day. It brought me you. It brought me back to life." "I won't let you go cold again," Clara said softly, echoing the words he had spoken on their wedding night all those years ago. Kane smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart flutter. "You never did, sweetheart. You never did." As the stars came out and the desert night settled around them, Clara leaned against her husband and counted her blessings. She had a home she loved, children who filled her days with joy and exasperation in equal measure, and a partnership with a man who had proven his love 1,000 times over in 1,000 different ways. The frozen stagecoach was a distant memory now, a story she sometimes told her children when they asked how she had met their father. But the love that had been born from that desperate moment had only grown stronger with time, deepening into something unshakable and true. Years continued to pass in the rhythms of ranch life. The children grew and began to find their own paths. Matthew, their eldest, showed a natural talent for working with horses and took over more of the ranch operations as Kane's joints began to protest the hard physical labor. Rose surprised everyone by developing a passion for medicine after helping the town doctor during an outbreak of influenza. and she left for medical school in San Francisco with her parents' blessing and a trunk full of books. Thomas became a teacher himself, taking over Clara's informal school and expanding it into a proper schoolhouse that served children from ranches throughout the region. The twins were still young, but they showed signs of being ranchers through and through, fearless on horseback and completely at home in the rugged landscape. Clara and Kane settled into middle age with grace. They were fixtures in Tonopah Junction now, respected members of the community who had weathered enough storms to have earned their place. Clara served on the church committee and organized fundraisers for the school. Kane was asked to join the town council and proved to have a talent for diplomacy that surprised everyone, including himself. But their favorite times were still the quiet evenings on the porch, just the two of them watching the sun paint the desert sky in impossible colors. Sometimes they talked, sharing thoughts about the children or discussing plans for the ranch. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, their hands clasped together, no words needed after so many years of partnership. On Clara's 50th birthday, Kane gave her a journal bound in fine leather. "For your story," he said. "The children have been asking me to write down how we met, how we built this life. But you are the one with the way with words. I thought you might want to preserve it." Clara opened the journal to the first page and saw that Kane had already written something there in his careful, measured hand. The frozen breath of winter had never seemed so cruel until Clara pressed her palms against the ice-covered window of the stagecoach and realized no help was coming. "Then I found her and my life truly began." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Kane, this is beautiful. It is the truth. Everything good in my life started the day I rode out into that blizzard and found you. Write it down, Clara. Let our grandchildren know how love can bloom even in the coldest, hardest places. Let them know that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the greatest blessings." So Clara began to write, filling page after page with the story of their life together. She wrote about the terror of the frozen stagecoach and the miracle of Kane appearing through the snow. She wrote about falling in love in the space of 4 days, about the decision to stay that changed everything, about building a life and a family in the harsh beauty of the Nevada high desert. She wrote about their children and the ranch and the community they had helped build. She wrote about hard times and good times, about laughter and tears, about all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a marriage. And through it all, she wrote about love, the kind that endured and deepened and became the foundation upon which everything else was built. When she finally finished, years later, the journal was full. She presented it to her grown children one Christmas, when they had all gathered at the ranch with their own families. Matthew had married a rancher's daughter and had 3 children. Rose had finished medical school and married a fellow doctor, and they practiced together in Reno. Thomas had a wife who taught alongside him and 2 studious daughters. The twins had both married brothers from a neighboring ranch, causing no end of amusement to everyone. The house was full of noise and chaos and love, 3 generations under one roof for the holidays. After Christmas dinner, Clara gave each of her children a copy of the journal she had written, and they read it together, laughing and crying as they learned details of their parents' story they had never known. "Did you really think you were going to die?" Rose asked, her doctor's mind focused on the medical aspects of hypothermia. "I was certain of it," Clara said honestly. "I had given up hope, and then your father appeared and everything changed." "Best day of my life," Kane added, his arm around Clara's shoulders. "Though our wedding day comes in a close second." "What about when we were born?" Matthew demanded with mock offense. "Those were the best days, plural," Kane clarified, and everyone laughed. Later that night, After the younger children had been tucked into bed and the house had finally quieted down, Clara and Kane walked out to the porch. It was winter again, and though there was no blizzard, snow fell softly, covering the landscape in white. "Takes me back," Kane said, watching the snow. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here instead of taking that teaching job?" "Not for a single moment," Clara said firmly. "I got to teach after all, just in a different way, and I got so much more. I got you, I got our children. I got a life richer than anything I could have imagined when I left Sacramento all those years ago." Kane pulled her close, and even after all these years, Clara still felt that spark of connection that had ignited in a frozen stagecoach a lifetime ago. "I won't let you go cold again," he murmured, the words that had become his promise to her, repeated so many times over the years that they had become a prayer. "I know," Clara replied, leaning into his warmth. "You never have." They stood together in the falling snow, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something lasting from that desperate beginning. The ranch spread out around them, the land they had worked and loved and passed on to their children. Inside the house, their family slept, proof of the life they had created together. Clara thought about the frightened young woman in the stagecoach, convinced she was going to die alone. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that woman that help was coming, that the cowboy who would pull her from the frozen coach would become her whole world, that the worst day of her life would lead to the best life she could have imagined. But perhaps it was better not knowing. Perhaps the joy was sweeter because it had been so unexpected, because it had come from darkness and cold and fear. Perhaps they appreciated what they had built precisely because they both understood how easily it might never have happened at all. "What are you thinking about?" Kane asked, reading her silence with the ease of long familiarity. "How lucky I am, how lucky we are." "Not luck," Kane said. "Blessing. We were blessed the day that storm brought us together." Clara could not argue with that. They had been blessed, abundantly and beyond measure. Blessed with love and family, and a life full of purpose and meaning. Blessed with each other. As they stood on the porch in the falling snow, two souls who had found each other against all odds, Clara realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but this. Standing with the man you loved, watching snow fall on the land you had built together, knowing your children slept safe and warm inside, knowing that everything you had hoped for had come true in ways you never expected. The years continued their steady march forward. Clara and Kane grew old together, their hair turning white, their movements slowing, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They handed over more responsibility to their children, stepping back to let the next generation take the lead while they watched with pride and satisfaction. They became grandparents many times over, and their house was always full of visiting family. Clara loved sitting in her rocking chair by the fire, a grandchild on her lap, telling stories about the old days. The children loved hearing about the frozen stagecoach and the cowboy who rode through the blizzard to save their grandmother. It had become a family legend, embellished and retold until it took on mythic proportions. But the truth, Clara always insisted, was even better than the legend. Because the truth was about two broken people finding each other and choosing to heal together. It was about love that grew slowly and steadily, rooted in respect and partnership and shared dreams. It was about building something lasting in a harsh landscape, about creating beauty and warmth and life where others saw only desolation. On a spring morning in 1922, 40 years after that fateful blizzard, Clara woke to find Kane's side of the bed empty. She rose and found him on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. "Could not sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Slept fine. Just wanted to watch the sun come up." Gets more beautiful every year. Clara took his hand, the skin papery with age but the grip still strong. We have had a good life, have we not? The best, Kane agreed. Better than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me that, Clara. You gave me everything. We gave it to each other. They stood together as the sun rose higher, warming the desert, bringing light to another day. Behind them, the house still slept, full of family who had come for Sunday dinner the day before and ended up staying the night. Soon the quiet would be shattered by the cheerful chaos of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But for now, it was just the two of them, the way it had been in the beginning. You remember what I said to you that first night? Kane asked. After I brought you here. Which part? All of it. But especially the promise. I won't let you go cold again. You have kept that promise every day for 40 years, and I will keep it for however many days we have left, Kane said, pulling her close. I love you, Clara, more now than ever. I love you too, Clara replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Thank you for riding out into that storm. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher who did not know what he was missing until you showed up. As the sun climbed higher, and the day truly began, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a frozen stagecoach to this sunlit porch, from strangers to partners to the deepest kind of love, they had traveled together. There had been hardships and heartaches along the way, but there had been so much more joy, so much laughter and love and life. The house began to stir behind them. Voices called out, children asking for breakfast, the day beginning in earnest. Clara and Kane turned to go inside, hand in hand as always, ready to greet their family and embrace another day in the life they had built together. Years later, when both Clara and Kane had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their children found the journal Clara had written. They also found a letter Kane had written near the end of his life, addressed to all his descendants. In it, he told the story one more time in his own words. He wrote about the day he found Clara, about the certainty he had felt even then that she was someone special. He wrote about their courtship and marriage, about watching her become a mother and grandmother, about growing old together in the house they had built. But mostly he wrote about love, about how it could come unexpectedly, from tragedy and hardship, about how it could transform lives and create legacies that lasted generations, about how the simple act of not giving up, of choosing to stay, of working together through good times and bad, could create something miraculous. The letter ended with these words. I was lost in the cold, frozen in grief, barely alive even though my heart still beat. Then I found Clara in that stagecoach and she found me, and we saved each other. We built a life full of love and meaning and joy. If you remember nothing else about us, remember this. Love is worth fighting for, it is worth staying for. It is worth the risk and the vulnerability and the hard work. Because in the end, love is all that really matters. Love is what lasts. The letter was framed and hung in the ranch house, which remained in the family for generations. The story of Kane and Clara was told and retold, inspiring descendants to believe in the possibility of unexpected love, of second chances, of building something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. And sometimes, on winter nights when snow fell on the high desert and the wind howled around the house, people swore they could feel a presence on the porch. Two souls standing together, watching the storm, holding each other close. A cowboy and the woman he pulled from a frozen stagecoach, bound together by a love that not even death could diminish. Their story had become legend, but it was rooted in truth. In the reality of one desperate winter day when a man rode out into a blizzard and found salvation in the form of a freezing woman trapped in a stagecoach. in the decision to stay and the courage to love again, in the thousands of ordinary days that made up an extraordinary life. The ranch still stood, passed down through the generations, a testament to what Clara and Kane had built together. The land they had worked and loved continued to sustain their descendants. And the love story that began in the frozen heart of a Nevada winter remained, warming all who heard it with its message of hope and resilience, and the transformative power of love. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the family or the success they had achieved, but the proof that love could bloom even in the coldest, hardest places. That two broken people could come together and heal each other. That a moment of desperate fear could lead to a lifetime of joy. And that sometimes, the best things in life came not from careful planning, but from the unexpected storms that forced us off our chosen paths and onto roads we never knew we needed to travel.